Okay, recording. Good evening and welcome to Talk It Out, a podcast on mental health with me, Marco Ritchie, and my co-host, Ivan Kayima.
That's the one. You got my name right. I'm glad. Got my
name right. Today, we're going to be talking about each other's background in mental health. I think we're going to start with you, Ivan. Me asking you a few questions about your background, kind of history.
Am I going first?
Okay, yeah, you are. You're on the spot. Well, thankfully, it's only me questioning you, mate. So, give me whatever answer you want. Also, I should say, for any listeners, if the audio is particularly bad, it's because I haven't got my microphone plugged in, which Ivan is very disappointed about.
I've told this guy, get it sorted before we start, and he goes and messes it up already. So apologies. I know my sound quality is crisp. Can't say the same for Marco.
Mine is my inbuilt microphone, so it's probably going to sound pretty inferior, but there you go. Anyway, let's get started.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think from my perspective, when it comes to your mental health, obviously I found out a lot about your mental health in the last episode. Yeah. You're talking about your anxiety. Actually, it's probably best if you just give a bit of a rehash of what you said last week, really. Yeah. Just to remind people.
I'm currently someone that deals with mild anxiety disorder. So, as you know, anxiety is an irrational fear of something. So I get into situations where if I feel I'm trying to stay on top of too many things, I start to panic, I start to worry, my heart starts beating, I get tense, and I keep replaying this a worrying scenario in my head for a whole day to the point that it drains me out and I'm exhausted by the time the day ends. So that's a battle I've since got a lot better at handling because of therapy. And Marco's here to kind of ask me a bit more about it.
So when were you actually diagnosed with your anxiety?
Last year, when I actually, on my second therapy session, to be honest, it was my second one, and we were just kind of getting to know me, and my therapist was asking me very clever questions just about kind of how I deal within certain scenarios, and asked me about my life and how I'm felt being able to achieve a good amount of success at a young age before the age of 30. And I'm still under the age of 30, just to make Marco jealous.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for bringing it up for the second episode in a row. I feel like that's going to be a theme now.
No, I'm joking. And just being able to how I've been able to manage it and what's been my driving force behind it. Kind of explaining my driving force behind it, that fear of failure and that fear of just letting my loved ones down. She was able to kind of see and assess what was actually wrong with me, and realize I was using the wrong fuel. So I guess for me it was kind of realizing at that stage and at that point what was my positive driving, what was the blessing and the curse of my driving force. So yeah, I was able to find out from then.
Okay. So when you were talking about a therapist, presumably this was like CBT counselling?
Yeah,
that kind of thing?
Yes. Cognitive behavioural therapy, am I right?
Yeah. That's
the one. It was an element of that, and also psychosis. Psychosis? No? What's the word? Something?
Psychoanalysis? I don't know.
Analysis, that's it. Yeah, sorry.
Is that right?
CBT and psychoanalysis, correct. CBT and psychoanalysis, that was my therapy, yeah.
Okay, so I've had a bit of CBT myself. I found it really effective. So did you?
Yeah, I mean, CBT just corrects the way you think about things. So it's crazy. It's kind of like conditioning, isn't it? You see how I watch Cesar Milan. You see the dog whisperer. It's crazy how a dog can be so amped up and excited and angry about something, and the minute you kind of kick it or trying to break that its thought process, it goes completely calm. And I'm not saying we react similar to that of a dog. I'm just saying it corrects the way you're thinking. If you're thinking in one way, what the therapist does is provide you tools to kind of see things in another way, which will then calm you down. In a way, it's kind of like a cheat code to how you're feeling. So it's breaking your cycle of thinking. And that's how I found CBT. And being able to use those tools and kind of see a situation in another way has helped me combat the problems I've had.
So when you actually started your therapy, why did you start it? Was it a particularly bad symptoms?
I had a full body checkup. And I just realized that at the end of it, the doctor you get to speak to after, for half an hour or for free after, we kind of ask you questions about yourself, your mental, how you're doing, things that are bothering you, and then they'll, depend on the severity of what you're saying, they'll recommend therapy or not, even if it's a minor. Because after my full assessment, it was a minor kind of things I was dealing with, just more sort of stress of handling my kind of position and where I am and who I am, and my feelings of insecurity about it. And so she, diagnosed me to kind of speak to a therapist. Well, not diagnosed, but just told me to speak to a therapist, and went from there.
How much therapy did you have?
I had 16 sessions.
Okay. And you found them particularly helpful, presumably.
Oh yeah. Therapy changed my life in the sense of such a short time. You're just able to see things in a different way. And there's so much power in someone that doesn't know you, being able to give you an unbiased, neutral view. This person doesn't know you, so they're only going to go by what you tell them. And it's how you feel, right? And the interesting thing about therapy is there's no pressure in the sense of they're clever therapists. They make it in a way in which you're not under any pressure to say or do anything, but in that capacity, you end up just speaking even or saying things even if you don't know what you're doing, they make it comfortable enough for you to say your deepest thoughts or your deepest feelings or your deepest concerns. And I guess there's power in knowing that it's only them that will be able to hear it and no one else. You don't have to worry about it leaking out, right? So, therapists are very clever in how they get you to speak without doing much.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but when I was having mine, it really is just like, it's almost like a little mind trick that they're playing on you, because
like a Jedi mind trick.
It's just like a little Jedi mind trick. It's just like a very simple question that for some reason you haven't really asked yourself, but as soon as they ask you, suddenly your perspective just switches. And you're like, oh right, yeah, I can see why that thought process is wrong or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I really do applaud them, because to do all those years of schooling, I just thought it was just laying down and them just wanting to be inner. I just thought it was just therapists trying to get in your business, but it really isn't. They're just very clever in how they talk to you. It's like they can read your facial expressions and know what to ask you based on your facial expressions, how you're reacting. So I applaud them, and for me, it's been very beneficial. And again, even if I have my moments or my episodes of anxiety, I have the tools in place which I've been able to deal with. So again, I want to get to the point where I do, probably do therapy later on, maybe once every 2-3 weeks at some point in my later life.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask actually. Is it something that you think you'll revisit?
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt.
Because as much as I keep likening it to my experience, but as much as I found it very helpful, you do still have episodes of anxiety or depression, and you
doesn't fix the problem. It just allows us to deal with it. I feel like we're all mentally sick, and all of us got mental health. Every human being, as long as you've got emotion, care, sensitivity, emotion, conflict. Unless you're one of those people that just don't have any conflict internally, regardless of whatever it be, we're all mentally unwell. Or we all have a mental kind of health issue. Or every single human being, and that's okay because we're humans. That comes with feeling. So
yeah, of course.
It's about flipping that around and knowing that it's okay to have that. And one of the most powerful things my therapist told me was that compassion starts with yourself. And once you understand that and know what that means, you're off to a good stead.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about helping yourself before you can start to help others, but also what you're feeling on the inside affects how you're going to feel on the outside. How you're going to start acting around people.
Definitely. It's kind of like what you put into your body as well, right? What you put into your body, it kind of shows in your skin, it shows in your behavior, and no different to therapy. The tools you learn and apply will appear in outer life as well. Okay. So I really feel for those that suffer in silence, honestly. It's horrible.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think probably the most interesting part of your kind of mental health journey when you were talking to me about it, and we've had chats about it in the past, is your ethnicity and the role it plays in your mental health. Because I've spoken to you about kind of Black communities and how they view mental health, and it seems very different to how mental health is perceived by a white community. So how would you say, if you could summarize the kind of perspective that Black communities have about mental health, which is a pretty big ask. I understand that. It's a pretty big question to answer, but can you kind of summarize it in any way?
I can't speak. I definitely can't. You're right. I definitely can't speak for everybody. And I definitely say the feelings and emotions have changed. But again, a lot of things, are tied to classism and social standards, right? Social economic standards. I feel like if Black people had the access to certain opportunities that white people may have, or the financial access or socioeconomic advantages, we'll be getting a lot more help. A lot of it is just down to their learning as well. If black people knew that and learned that these services are available and they're there to help, then a lot of people will take them. But it's money. And a bit of that, or not, of course, that's just one element. That's way too many eggs to get into. Then you're talking about marginalization, you're talking about, generational wealth, you're talking about disadvantages, oppression. That's one subject for another time. But I guess if you're going right now into why, one of the main reasons it's a taboo. Again, being a black kid in South London, being born in such environments and living in these environments, you're taught weakness is a sin. Weakness is liable to death, like liable to death by weakness. Weakness is just something that ain't tolerated or allowed. And having emotional care, or even something as little or something as important as crying or having that release, is seen as weak. And that kind of toxic environment is not healthy, especially as you grow up, because at some point you can't stay a kid forever. It's cool as a kid, or to not talk about things and be seen a certain way. But as you get older and you find your place in life, and perceptions, optics, things change, you realize you can't just resort back to what you have to keep evolving and adapting. And part of that is, I guess, becoming more vulnerable, becoming more emotional, having a more emotional intelligence and response to things, because how you're supposed to function in society or even being an adult without those kind of key things like emotional intelligence. You're coming across many different types of people and spheres. So being I guess being in that environment where you're not able to nurture that, or being able to go through these kind of emotional things being young, because from our environments we're taught that as weak, that will really cripple you as you get older. And for a lot of people it really has crippled them to the point where because it was such a taboo being seen as weak, looking back now as a kid, a lot of the things that I saw growing up was mental health issues, right? You'd be dark, it would be sun, it would be a really hot day, and then you see a couple hood boys coming out, and then they're wearing big puffer jackets with hoodies up in hot weather. I'm thinking, what are you doing? Like, when you're young, you're thinking, oh, it's crazy. But when you look back, that's something's not right about that. Right? Or people that's just suffering in silence, or, losing a loved one and not crying about it, and just, trying to act business as usual the next day without having any grief or taking time to feel it. You realize all of that stems from that toxic environment we had of growing up as black kids, thinking that, we having sharing emotion or not expressing how you feel is weak. And so again, and as you get older, that cripples you a lot, because you're unable to have any emotional intelligence to deal with different situations. When you're young and in a certain bubble, in a certain environment, that may work. But as you get older and you want to go on in life, you're going to meet tons of different people who may be more emotionally ahead of you. And if you can't keep up with that, that'd be your workplace, that could be family, your kids, that kind of thing. And if you can't keep up with that and you can't develop in that case, what good are you to anybody? Or how are you able to function or be what's the word? A good contributor to society. It's so damaging, the things we learned growing up. And again, it all stems from that ignorance of being you have to be tough, or you have to be this and that in order to survive. It just stems from ill learning, miseducation. That's what I believe it stems from. Sorry to keep waffling on. That was
no, so it's good. So it sounds like you didn't really have those conversations when you were young.
No, there wasn't any kind of ignore them. And for a lot of people in my environment, we lack a father figure. My father passed when I was 8. Like, my brother passed when I was 13. And when you're young and you don't, especially as a man, I'm talking from the perspective of a man. I don't know what, I'm not a woman, so I don't know what, I can't speak on behalf of a woman. But as a man, it's crippling. And you go ahead in life thinking you don't need a father, you don't need a dad, but then you realize those feelings are just grief. You're just angry. And for me, that was my case. I was angry. Like, it took me 10 years to get over my grief. I just ignored my pain as opposed to dealing with my pain. And I used that as a driving force to succeed. But at the same time, it was taking its toll on me. So it really hit full pelt when I got to about 19, 20. That's when I really started accepting and let it hit that my father had passed. And bear in mind, I was 8 years old when he passed. So from 19 to 26, 27, I allowed myself to fully process, the grief of my father's passing. And when you don't have like a male influence in your life to kind of tell you right from wrong, or to show you the ways of trying to be a man, you're going to learn based on what you see around you. You're going to try to pick up any kind of influence, right? And then you become very, not resentful, but you kind of get set in your way with your behavior. And that's definitely the case for me, because even to this day, there's things that have happened in my past that have affected me greatly now. One of them being I can't take orders from another man. As in, like, I never had that growing up, so I don't know what it's like to take something older for something as a man. And the minute you try to give that to me, I take that as a sign of disrespect. So for me, I became hell bent on succeeding on my own right. I wanted to always succeed and achieve greatness off Ivan Kayima's accord. Nobody else, because again, nobody else taught me how to be a man. My mother done her best. I love her to bits. But there's only so much a woman can teach a man. Only so much. So the rest of it, I kind of had to lean on my best friends. I had to lean on male influences or the elders. You know, when you're from the hood, the elders teach you the way. And so, you know, you learn that with all the things you learn from them, you kind of apply that and lead your life, you know, trying to do right, because in your head you're thinking, well, this is the only way I learn. I only know how to be man because of the things I've seen and how I've taught myself, and no one can tell me nothing. So when an older man tries to like put his arm over me or tell me what to do, in my mind I'm thinking F off, like, bruv, you don't know me. Even now, I'm not saying it's great, it's not good behavior, but that's all I knew growing up, and it's kind of stuck with me, and I'm trying to shed that kind of behavior, because I know that for me, if I want to be a good father, husband, and have kids, I'm gonna have to be more emotionally vulnerable, emotionally understanding to things, and you know, not be so rigid and hard-edged. But you know, it's a process. I'm learning, and but the man, in terms of a man telling me what to do, I don't think I'll ever get over that one. But you know, I attached success to that, knowing that whatever I achieve is because Ivan Kayima achieved it. No one else can tell me nothing. So you know, there's still a few things I've got to work on in order to be the best version of myself.
Okay, I mean, everything you were just saying then, we've kind of got a similar background in respect to father figures. Like I didn't grow up with mine, and I'm very similar. I'm a real issue with like.
But then look at you, Marco. You've achieved such a high level of success yourself at a young age, and that was because again you went off by your own morals of what you think a man should be, and you kind of rode that.
I mean, my journey is a bit different because of, you know, two older brothers as well. But but they very much. I lived with them for a few years. Anyway, we're getting into my background. We're talking about you. I was just likening it to me, just what you naturally do in it. But anyway, you were talking about the kind of like this kind of like hood attitude, right? Of young boys who are growing up
in these neighborhoods. Yeah.
In these neighborhoods, you can't really talk about how you're actually feeling. You said at one point that it's quite a common scenario. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
These kind of scenarios in these neighborhoods. You made me think about. I think I've mentioned this book in the last episode as well, but the Akala book, the new one, the one Race and Class in the. I can't remember the full title. Amazing book, but he was talking about exactly that. These young boys who are growing up in these neighborhoods, and that it's the young boys who don't have the father figures, who end up kind of like growing up and getting very kind of angry at their position, and they can't really take they don't really like figures or authority and that kind of stuff. It just really reminded me of that passage. But what I'm trying to get to is it sounds like this is a pretty widespread issue, but the taboo of kind of looking weak, as it were, means that none of these kids essentially are talking to each other about their mental health. It feels very weird for me to be saying this as a white man and not having experienced it. So if I've said anything wrong there, please correct me.
Oh, you know I will. Don't worry about that.
I know you will. I know you will. But yeah, it sounds like a pretty big issue that's not really being addressed.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If you're a young person in the neighborhood and you're not being taught how to express or show emotions or care, or that if you try to show any of that, it's deemed weak, and you have a bunch of boys all in the same situation, what the hell are you going to talk about? It may leak out. It leaks out, but it doesn't ever become a full-blown conversation. You know, people don't understand. There's lots of different types of therapy. FIFA sessions with your boys are therapy. Barbershops are therapy. But then it depends how good you are of an active listener. You're always going to hear little bits that people are leaking out in conversation. So, for example, you could be playing FIFA, right? Me and you could be playing FIFA. Oh, my auntie's really sick. She's going to die. Oh, yeah, I just scored 1-0. little things that people leak out in conversations that now it's active choice. They're not going to repeat it again, but that's a little cry for help. So as an active listener, you're going to think to yourself, do I want to hear that and address it, or do I just want to go on as normal? And that's where the education lacks, because if you have two people that are not educated or have that emotional awareness or that rationale to kind of understand that, then the situation is not going to get addressed. You're going to have two people suffering in pain and not talking about it. So that's why we've got to flip the narrative of people in these neighborhoods and become active listeners to what people are saying. Read between the lines and hear the crying for help that these young boys are giving each other.
Do you think it's changed in recent years? Do you think it's getting better?
It's getting better, definitely. I'll say as a society, we become more progressive and more open about mental health, and we stress it more and more. And I'm definitely seeing a lot more young boys from the hood who are talking more about mental health amongst one another and checking in on their friends and doing a bit more. I'm definitely seeing a lot more improvement on that. Yeah, especially for my generation. Yeah, we were just in bliss, my generation.
And how far do you think you need to go?
We're always going to have a long way to go. Think about all the things that we got to fight against: socioeconomic deprivation, societal deprivation, stereotyping, labeling. A lot of things we got to go through before we can get there properly. Still a lot of those toxic traits, they formed our bedrock to who we are. So as much as we want to progress, part of that is our foundation. Some of this toxic feelings or behaviors. So there's a lot of work, a lot of unlearning, and a lot of healing that we've got to do, especially as a Black community.
How do you think you should go about trying to learn these things?
Talking about podcasts, therapy.
yeah. I agree with that.
Therapy, family, kind of, talking with families as well. And it also starts with, the main primary institute of socialization, which is family. So your families, there's a lot, especially in African culture, in a lot of families, there's a toxic behavior where they don't address their own feelings. And a lot of them are stuck in loveless marriages. And you kind of see that behavior leak out, but it's never addressed because, again, it's generational. They were taught not to speak about things. So, you always have to wonder, where do they learn it from? A lot of it comes from our parents. They don't know how to express or share love because they were treated how they treat us is how they were treated as well, right? So it's about breaking that cycle and being the generation of change. So I know for myself, when I have kids, I'm going to push them to be what they want. I'm going to talk and let them address and share their feelings and emotions, and being humble enough to know that if I upset my child and I was in the wrong, I'll apologize to my child. I think it's important that they need to hear, I'm sorry. As a parent, I'm sorry. And I prompt, let's work on this and let's be that. And I know that for my kids, I'm going to do all of those things and, create as very much comfortable environment as possible so they can talk to me about anything. I mean, only now, don't get me wrong, my mother's fantastic. She's done a great job. It has taken us now to this point for our own kind of like healing to get to a point where I can talk to my mum just about anything now, right? But that wasn't the case when I was younger. Because again, I was internally hiding a lot of things and keeping a lot of things in, but I realized it wasn't healthy. So I know for me, when I have a kid, I know from the ages of 5, 6, if I do something wrong, I'm going to apologize to my child and create a safe space where they can grow up and tell me anything, absolutely anything. So, yeah.
So, one thing you just spoke about there, one thing you hit on was about family and your kind of cultures. And one thing actually that stands out to me, which I suppose is something that I kind of struggle to understand the answer to because I haven't been in that scenario, but I always kind of see Black communities as, correct me if I'm wrong, but values of like family connection and supporting each other. It feels stronger than at least I've experienced in my life with white communities.
Yeah,
so that's a very simple comparison
to family structure. So you're saying the Black family structure has always been stronger than white.
That's what it's always seemed to me as, and that's kind of why I kind of find it even more confusing that there's such a taboo about talking about mental health in Black communities when there is already that kind of network and structure.
Think about from immigration when we came here, right? Black people were always those Black people against the world. As soon as they, from when they were pulled over in ships or when they come over via the Windrush immigration of the 70s, 80s, a lot of Africans came over to England, for example. It's always been us against the world. It's always been Black against the world. So Black people will team up and group up together to deal with their problems. And therapy and these institutions have always been seen as very white. And let's be real, Black community as a whole is not very trusting of the white community. Black community doesn't trust white people. Don't trust white people. And history has shown white people have never had our best intentions or have never wanted to really work with us or be friends with us. So Black people, there's a lack of trust between Black community and white people. there's just a huge lack of trust. So where they've seen these institutions are predominantly run by white people, they're going to see it as a white thing. Well, this is just a white thing. We'll deal with our own issues. What kind of white person told me about my experience? And I get that. That's why I stress that, with black people in therapy, it's important that you get black therapists to speak to. Because look, a white person, my therapist wasn't white. A white therapist is never going to understand what a black man from South London goes through or has been through. So that's why, when you see those lack of resources and lack of options, you're going to band up. You're not going to do therapy. I mean, granted, it's not helpful because a lot of the situations won't get dealt with, but you're going to see it in my head, well, a white person can't help me, so we've got to help ourselves.
Well, I suppose outside of the therapy part, if we're just talking about community family structure, if there's, at least it seems to me that there's already kind of like a strong infrastructure and a network of people.
Family is strong, black community, yeah. But
you're telling me that there's such a taboo, even talking to each other about mental health.
Yeah, it's just mental health per se. Again, it's not in black families. It's not mental health though. It's what's wrong or what's this problem, what's this issue. So it's everything except the term mental health.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? That's what I mean by that. But in terms of them talking about it or addressing it, not necessarily dealing with it, but addressing it, that happens all the time. But it's just not going to be coined mental health. It's going to be something else. Do you know what I mean?
So is it the term that is quite taboo?
The term is more striking than taboo as the actual thing.
Right.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. Correct. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Fair enough. And you were talking about like therapists then about a white therapist isn't going to know how to help a black guy from South London.
Yeah.
Do you think that would go quite a way of helping black communities talk about mental health? If
definitely
if
black therapist, because you
therapists.
see someone that looks like you who probably understand or comes from the same way of life and has the same struggles as you, so of course you're going to feel more comfortable, and yet they're trained to help you deal with it. You're going to feel a lot more comfortable talking to them than you will someone who is historically is seen as your enemy.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
I think I read recently actually about they're actually it's this mental health act, the reform bill that they've proposed. So the Mental Health Act in I think the latest iteration was the 80s. Yeah. And they're now proposing a reform which is going to introduce the proposal is to have more ethnically diverse therapists and people to support for mental health. And I actually thought that is, I don't really understand why that isn't the case already, to be honest. Why
everything's got to be monumental when it comes to black people. Like, we can't, everything has to be extra with people when it comes to black people having something, equality, or getting something that helps us. Always has to be made into something bigger than it needs to be, unfortunately. When you're right, it should be a normal thing. It should be very normal. But these are the strides and these are the fights that black people go through. This is the things we have to deal with. And that's why we say, how can a white person ever understand that?
Yeah, fair enough. I think I've asked you everything I wanted to ask you, to be honest, Ivan. That was really interesting.
Thank you very much, Marcus.
It's a lot of stuff that I've always wanted to kind of ask you. I have kind of asked you in the past, but not.
Yeah, we've always touched on it lightly, but we've never, I guess, had a proper kind of conversation about it, or have we?
No, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. Thanks for being so honest.
You got to, man. Hey, listen, we're talking it out. This is what it's called, is talking it out. So we got to talk it out. Do you know what I mean? So,
that could be the tagline. That's really catchy.
Talk it out. We've got to talk it out. Do you know what I mean? I like that. Do you know
Perfect.
What I mean?
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
So I'm more than happy to, kind of talk about these things, because I think it's important. As someone with experience is always going to be able to help. The aim is, you hope someone takes something from this and applies it to themselves and are able to learn from it, right? So if someone's able to take this and learn from it, then for me it's a win. I'm happy to. So okay, I would love to know more about yourself and kind of white community and white society and how they feel about certain things. I'm guessing, are we going to leave it for next call, or we can do it now, or?
Well, I think we should do that in the next episode.
All right. That was a good idea. Nice teaser.
Little teaser, draw people in. But yeah, I think just one last question, really.
Sure.
I know we're supposed to be finished, but one last question. If there was one thing you could say to a young black boy who might be in the same position as you were, what would you say to him?
As soon as you can, go to the NHS and get therapy. I think every black male in this country needs therapy in some way, in some element, especially 18 plus needs it. And if that's not possible, lean on your friends, don't be afraid to seem vulnerable. It's not weak. It shows it's a lot more, you're much stronger, willing to be vulnerable in front of those that you care about than not. And to be honest, those that may laugh or joke or take the piss, they're not for you then. But those that can understand and support you, they're your friends. And don't suffer in silence. That's one thing I'll definitely say. Don't suffer in silence. It's not worth it. If you need something to get something off your chest, if you need something to share, something that's important, that's getting to you, share it, speak. There are people there that care and want to listen, but they're not going to know unless you say. So that's my advice.
Second that. Good way to finish it.
Thank you very much.
Cool. So that's the end of this episode.
We look forward to welcoming you guys back. Next up, we'll be talking to Marco about white community and white society and what they think. We
will. I don't know if I can give you as much in-depth knowledge, but I'll give it a go.
Yeah, thank you. All right, guys.
Cool.
Well, take care. You have a good one, Marco. We'll speak soon.
You too. All right. Cheers.